Does anybody want to add to that? Like, what do you look for in a portfolio? Like, what should a student be thinking about? Where am I going to focus? How do I present myself?
Well, there's definitely a baseline. You have to be covering both areas. I mean, you have to be able to communicate visually and have good interaction design. And so everyone that gets a job at Google has to go through a design test, and it's one of the more grueling and annoying sometimes processes. You're like, oh my God, really? I got to do this test. But it's...
What does the test include? Like, what can you say?
It's like a sample design problem. There's 5 or 6 problems, and you essentially, so you're supposed to do it in a couple of hours. And everyone is like, really, a couple of hours? But yeah, that's about the pace.
Really,
that
like what? Like design an app, or?
Like design an application for checking gas prices on your mobile phone, and a couple key screens, wireframes, and a project plan.
2 hours go.
Go. Yeah, you get 2 hours.
Your career depends on it. So
What's that?
Your career depends on it. Don't worry.
Not your career. Yeah. Well, so and I think those are, but people understand the context that those come in, and it just tells you a lot when you look at that and what people do with that specific problem versus some portfolio thing where maybe they had a requirement from a product team, it wasn't what they wanted. So it's just it's what you'll be doing every day is dealing with problems like that. So we find that useful.
Abby?
Oh, I was just going to say the design test, from what I understand, is a big part of interaction design recruiting, at least in the Valley. So this idea, I know Airbnb does this. So okay, this is a thing, this is a real thing that we need to do right now. Here's something we as a team are thinking about, and you get invited in, and you're expected to think through with a multidisciplinary team and start making flows and wireframes and showing how you would work and how you would join that team. So I think having that comfort, being almost improvisational and willing to do stuff fast and on your feet, and I think like Jacquie was saying earlier, being able to express and defend your design. And that's not uncommon from what I understand. Truth be told, I haven't actually done it since I interviewed at Google and turned them down.
Okay, another question. Does anyone, just get back. I'm going back.
I have a question specifically for Andy. Can you give me an example of when you combine your industrial design skills and your interaction design skills? And I have another question. Do interaction designers also change the way we interact with the environment rather than just
Okay, so it was specifically, the first question was for Andy, and it was how do you combine your industrial and your interaction skills?
I don't know. So let's see. I don't have a good example from Google, but I was at HP at one point, and we were doing a lot of touch devices, and ended up working very closely with a lot of the hardware designers on basically the different components, and it was really critical to have that crossover. Like. We talked about different kinds of interaction components and how you'd hold the device, like smaller devices and early tablets. We were like, God, these just don't fit together. So, so you couldn't. We got to that point finally. It's kind of obvious now, like a few years later, with all of these tablets. Apple's done some great things with them, and at the time, they just didn't get how integrated those are, and I think that's just more than ever that products are you have to be thinking about the physical design of it and the screen, and especially with everything being all of these touch interfaces now being like the new way. It's just critical. So
another question, Sebastian.
Just out of curiosity, how do you like, obviously you guys sort of come from not the birth of interaction design, but sort of the emergence, I guess, as an actual field. But like, how do you imagine it? Obviously it's changing quite fast, and how do you, in sort of a combination of your wildest dreams and sort of realistically, how do you sort of imagine it growing to a certain extent, on how sort of crazy you think it would be and how sort of normal you think it would be? Does that make sense at all?
So this field is emerging, and Sebastian's asking, how do you see this growing, and how the significance is that, or
to a certain extent, and where in our lives it's gonna sort of enter more and more.
Where in our lives is interaction design going to enter more and more?
This is a really tough one. I mean, I could say that it's shrinking in the sense that products are shrinking. You know, miniaturization is having a massive effect on user interfaces. In fact, you know, to the point where we're having to make things that are bigger than the technology that actually runs them. So, you know, touch screens still have to be touchable, but the technology is going to get smaller and smaller until it disappears. So that's going to affect our lives. Of course, biotechnology is going to have a massive influence, you know, integration of technology into us, such that, you know, you won't know that somebody's interacting with something. You know, you think about people wearing, for example, glasses that have a little display in them, so that already they can be looking at something while they're having a conversation with you. You think it's annoying, you know, having a conversation with somebody while they're screwing around on their mobile phone. Well, when they start sort of just having a glazed look in their eye because they've got a retinal implant and they're doing something, they're playing a game or something, get that. So it's going to massively affect our lives, and I have, you know, young children. I wonder what they're going to be interacting with when they grow up.
So is that interaction design? That is it making humans like machines or integrating machines? Is that interaction design?
It's making the interactions human, is what I'd say to that. I don't know how else to say that.
Jacquie?
I guess I've been in this field for like 18 years or something, and what I think is so awesome about it is how much it changes. It's like constantly. Like you have to always be learning new things and always thinking about problems in a new way and designing for new platforms and, you know, anticipating new behaviors and helping people change. And I think that that's what's really exciting about it. It's just going to constantly change, and we're going to design that change, but it's also going to happen, and we'll have to adapt to it.
Wow, so if everything's changing, what doesn't change? What do you learn? You learn change.
How to solve problems, how to solve problems and how to learn. I'd say those are the two big things, is knowing how to communicate, talk.
I think what else is changing is the bar is raising higher and higher. And I think companies are users are more sophisticated. I mean, people are the same, but they expect a lot more. They won't put up with the crap we would with like Netscape 1, you know, the kinds of things you would deal with interface-wise and product-wise. The caliber of design has to be way beyond what most teams who don't have expertise in interaction can do. So they really kind of get that, like, God, if we're going to compete, God, we really need a designer on this. Like, so it's nice that companies are getting that they really need interaction help.
And Apple's success is proving that to a lot of people. Marcus, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, like a trend that I'm noticing among startups is that you don't put your API in like at the end. So API is an application programming interface, which is an interface to allow other websites to talk to your website and change data. So for example, Mint.com uses an API to scrape, they get information in a clever way from your bank accounts. And so it's basically pretty much a normal pattern now where, like, if you're a startup, you have to start thinking about your API pretty early on. And it's sort of part of your sort of first step forward is saying, we do this, plus we talk to these other things. And so, you know, today you've got a certain subset of people sort of doing mashups where they literally use a few tools together to create an outcome that they want. And I predict that this is going to become more and more mainstream, that people are going to want to be able to build combinations of things themselves, and it's not going to be just total uber geeks that are going to be doing it. It's going to be something that we have to figure out how to make accessible to people, and so that people can combine, you know, a photo printing service with some kind of image creation service and create some really cool thing that hasn't been done before. And so I think, what does that mean for interaction designers? We somehow have to think about those mental models. Like, how do people think about two things coming together, and how do they actually have control over that? So I couldn't sketch one of those interfaces for you now, but I just think that there's a trend there. You look at what really techno-literate people are doing, and I think there's a fairly reasonable chance that less technically literate people will also be doing that in coming years. And the mashup, I think, is a big paradigm shift for us.
It's kind of everyone has it now. So what are we not answering for this? What is an interaction designer? Listening to the patient.
Yeah, towards that end of what is an interaction designer, I was wondering if you guys would like to just talk about some of the favorite projects you've ever been on.
Okay, Scott, what's your favorite project?
Probably, I mean, the most recent project with Videographer is amazing. You know, we made the first app album with her, and that was really incredible.
Did you guys hear that? Bjork, he's partnered with.
Wait, you guys did the one with Bjork?
Yeah, it's called Biophilia. And that was really, really satisfying because A, you're working with one of the greatest artists in the world, and she has such incredible ideas and artwork. And B, she also gave us an incredible amount of creative freedom. And Gage said that question, you know, do something great with viruses. You know, that's the kind of task, you know, you really like to have, especially kind of mid-career when you feel like you're getting good at something. So it was very, very satisfying working with someone who has so much confidence in her own work that she can really, really listen to everyone around her too, and make a product that's, I'm so proud of that project. It's really, you know, probably one of the greatest things, you know, I've ever had a chance to be a part of, because everyone's so good. And if you can work with people you're learning from, because that's one of the problems when you kind of create your own company, is like you're at the top, but you know, you really need like a mentor and other people to guide you. So getting a chance to work with someone like Bjork is fantastic, because then you keep, you know, learning and getting inspired by that person's vision.
Cool. Do we have another project that somebody's dying to say something about?
The project I worked on, IMVU, what was really satisfying about that is we created this quirky sort of social network where you could dress up your avatar and go around and meet people from around the world. And when I would hang out with people who used the product and they would tell me, oh, I met my husband on here, or I never knew I was creative before, but now I have a business making fashion online and I actually gave up my day job. I think that's like why I like to do social media products, because you feel like you're having not just an impact as in you're solving problems for people, but you're actually helping people grow and self-realize a little bit. And certainly the internet has the power to let people discover things about themselves that they wouldn't get to discover living in a small town in the middle of nowhere, because they can reach out, they can find kindred spirits, and they can learn that they're okay, they're not some quirky person, and then they can actually enjoy that. And so that was certainly what IDEO was all about, was like, you know, let your freak flag fly and learn to love yourself. So that was very satisfying.
Cool. Just a couple more questions. Dylan, your hand's tired, it's been up for so long.
No, that's perfect. Hi.
Well, I was watching you earlier. Do you still want to ask your question? Dylan, do you want to ask your question? What's your question?
Oh, okay.
I'm favoring the students in front here because they really initiated this whole thing by asking their questions in the beginning. So.
Okay, so I've just been noticing, like, in our program that everyone seems to have kind of different, like, places they come from or different personal interests that kind of like guides them through what they're trying to like get out of it. And I'm just wondering and like I feel like every creative person kind of has like a few things that they just like have to do, and like otherwise their work is just like meaningless. So I'm wondering like what personal interests or kind of like creative have-tos in your life come to fruition, interactions, and like what makes it rewarding for you, like on a level.
Well, I guess it drives me insane when things don't work right. Like, and you're like, why does it work like that? Who did this? Like, and when you get a chance to actually deal with those, and actually when you get to find the actual person who did it, I'm kidding about that, mostly. But it's fun to be able to deal with those things, and it's so satisfying that when you see actually your stuff not get noticed in that way is actually like for design is often the biggest success, that it just kind of falls into the background and they get to go on with their lives. So I don't know, that's what I really enjoy.
As the freelancer or the contractor, a lot of my work takes a long time, 2 years for a whole project, working with one company. So I don't see a huge amount of progress, so it can be frustrating actually for me. So what do I get thrills out of seeing a product hit the market, a physical device or a piece of software, an app or whatever. But honestly, it's the human interactions that I really enjoy. I've sort of hinted at that earlier with user research. I love working with people, I love working with the team, I like working with my employee. You know, that's what gets me going. And you know, working together, actually, you know, working together at a whiteboard, figuring something out. You know, putting stuff down on paper. Getting stuff out into the world, ideas into the world. I think one of the things, sorry, going off on a slight tangent, but you know, what happens in a lot of companies, way too many companies now, is that people sit around a table and shoot the shit about a project or a product or whatever. And lots of ideas are coming out, but very little is actually being documented or sort of, you know, taken to the next level. And that's, I think, where we can help as facilitators. It's like, that great idea, what would it look like? Like this? Oh, okay, great, let's move on. That's what I enjoy doing.
Let me, I have a couple questions I want to ask specific people. So this one's to Jacquie. What was it that made you want to start your own company? What was missing in the world?
I think the main reason is, well, the main reason for me personally was wanting to be my own boss. And also wanting to continue to work with my now business partners, and formerly we were in architecture school together, so having collaborators that I enjoyed working with. But as a designer, wanting to create the system within which I worked, not inheriting it from someone else. That was also what was interesting about coming from architecture. Architecture is such an old profession, and it really established, for the most part, in process, and coming into new media, what we called it at the time, and being able to really design how we do the work, and being able to start a company and say, I'm going to design how we do this, how we work with our clients, how we manage the studio, and what kind of work environment it is, and try to do it in our own way and not just how someone else is telling us to do it.
That sounds amazing.
It
How about
is.
Scott? You did something similar. What was missing in the world? Why did you start your company?
Oh, I have a lot of funny questions, stories about that, because I mean, I was just trying to find a place in the world for this type of, you know, physical interactivity. Or, I tried to convince companies to do it. Like, I worked at Adobe. I was one of the creators of After Effects with my buddies. We got bought by Adobe, and it was really successful. And then they let me do, you know, whatever I wanted, because the stuff I wrote was selling really well. So I experimented for, this was like 1996, and I experimented for like a couple months, and I made something that was Flash. It was in Adobe. It was Flash. It just, you know, loaded the minimal amount of assets, created animation, interactivity. I gave a demo to John Warnock, you know, the CEO of Adobe, and he said, people don't want to see dancing monkeys on web pages. I said, that's exactly what people want to see. So then I left Adobe really soon after that. And I kept trying to find a place, because I just had this vision of just joy and fun, like just to make things that are wonderful, that are like movies, but are interactive. And I worked at a research lab with, you know, Ollie, and we could just do anything we wanted, which was really fun. But we never made products though, because it was not like product focused, and I really wanted to make things for an audience. So then I just started my own company. I had a job offer, like they wanted to hire me back at Adobe. You know, they offered me really big jobs there later. But the main problem, actually one of the biggest problems I found is the windows don't open in big companies. That's actually like my main gripe, is you just can't, there's like always an HVAC truck out front, and like you just can't open the windows. But besides that, the main thing is the culture. Is I just wanted to create a culture that wasn't completely like profit focused, that was really focused on like joy and wonder in the world, and a sense of just understanding the universe and how fantastic it is. And there's no company out there that has that as its specific mission. So I just did it because there was no other company to work for that did that.
That's awesome. And just to give you guys a little color, Scott invited us to his studio this spring, and we took the intro class there, and they all came out and had this kind of unanimous, it was like Willy Wonka's factory. The Gene Wilder Willy Wonka. Okay, I'd like to maybe reach out to the audience. Questions that have to be answered before we break off. Yes.
I was gonna see if I could propose a possible answer to what an interaction designer is, or what is.
Oh God, we got to address that question, don't we? Because you all have to tell your grandmothers what you do. So, okay, go ahead.
based off of what I've felt personally and what I've seen here, I think interaction design, interaction design solves the human interaction need. And I think the key aspect is the human aspect of it, and that when people interact with something, there's a human approaching an object or software, hard software, or hardware, and there's an interaction that takes place, and obviously, and based off of how that interaction is designed, it creates an experience for the user. And where I can kind of ground that in personal experience is I see fairly often my friends just extremely frustrated with their computer or some device, and they're like, I must be stupid, I can't figure this out, like this should be really easy. And
so what is your question? Are you looking for a validation for your definition? Or?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I have it right, I guess.
Okay, do we have it right? We got to answer that question. All right.
I guess it's not a question.
Okay, let's hit the panel with this one. So, Oliver.
Just don't tell your grandmother that, she won't get it.
Ollie, when you're on the phone and you're back to the UK and you're telling them what to do, what do you say?
You know, I've been wrestling for this for 2 decades now. I haven't figured out how to say it yet. One of the most successful ways is by a negative way, which is, you know that VCR, well this used to be, you know the VCR with the clock flashing 0? Well, you know, I help make it so that you can make the time actually, you know, show the time. I mean,
that's what I was going to get to.
Yeah, it's really hard to say positive things, although I've got to say that, you know, with the iPhone and, you know, some more recent sort of technologies, touch and gestural interfaces, it is becoming a compelling experience. What Scott does is beautiful stuff, I'll tell you that. You have to see his stuff, it is so compelling. But in product design, you know, compelling experiences haven't really occurred until fairly recently. And now you can say, I do an app for an iPhone or something like that. That's a bit more helpful.
Jackie, if you were trying to explain to your parents why they should pay tuition for your school to become an interaction designer, how would you?
Because there's lots of jobs out there, high-paying jobs. Yeah, it's a high-demand profession, and very rewarding if you have the skills of creativity with some technical abilities, and it's only up. Like, our worlds are only increasingly becoming more digital and more interactive in terms of how we interact with everything. Our buildings are going to become interactive, our signage, our everything.
So it's some of those examples, you're just saying it's the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's all
Yeah.
it is.
When everything's connected to the cloud and everything's digital, it will require a designer to conceive of those experiences and then actually figure out every component of it. You know?
I love it, and I hear more and more interaction designer as the Uber project manager as well, because they have to make sense of all this stuff.
They do, yeah. They really are
Andy.
Why do designers have to define? I mean, but so like if you're a marketing manager or in business development, people don't ask the same question. So I kind of ask why do we get that question? When I think what we do is usually more in front of you. I mean, every day. So I kind of like even the term designer way back. I just think it's just I don't know. I kind of cringe a little bit because I don't want to have to define it exactly.
What do you say to your grandma?
I tell her to make things easier to use, usually.
Abby, do you have an answer? What's interaction design?
Well, it's funny. I was also going to say, I mean, you make things easier to use, and with the problem with being an interaction designer is if you do it well, it disappears. You don't actually see what you did, right? Because it becomes really obvious. And I think just echoing what Jackie said, and I hate defining interaction design in terms of technology, but there is inevitably a technology component, and certainly with sensor technologies and something called the Internet of Things, where things are all connected to each other and to the cloud. It's really about how you interact with people and the world around you.
I just want to add that I think that great design doesn't disappear necessarily. I think there's lots of examples like Mint, which we've talked about before, where the design is the product and is actually how it becomes magic. This lady here needs her.
But I want to add one more thing onto that. So yeah, I agree. I think one of the really important things as a designer is for the most part, I totally agree with you, but I think for the most part, people, if you're designing something, you have a big responsibility because what people usually don't want is more of your experience, right? They want less, like they want a whole lot less of it usually, unless if you're going to add more and experience, it better be really good. Like it better be something they want to do and enjoy.
Nice, unless it's Disneyland or something like that. Okay, who has a question that really this whole room wants to hear?
Name tag on the shoulder. Laura.
Okay, well, so you guys have said that interaction design really covers all the designs, and that everything's going to need to be integrated at some point, that it's the future of design. No? Did I just get that wrong? Well, okay. It envelopes everything. Why should I be focusing specifically on interaction design instead of going into a specific field of design and then using like interaction design just as like a booster to help myself be more rounded? Like, why just be an interaction designer, or isn't an interaction designer all of those things? Like, I'm confused as to like, because I feel like we're in a visual design class right now, but we're not going to graduate becoming visual designers. We're still going to graduate as interaction designers. And I don't understand really what the point of that is, or what you see as the significant difference. So that was kind of a garble, but please dissect it and go for it.
Really quickly, I think if you're in the interaction design program, you're positioning yourselves for software and applications that can be applied in many different places. And in the future, more and more places. If you wanted to do fashion design, if you wanted to do graphic design or architecture, you could do those things and study interaction design and figure out how it affects your field. But if you're in interaction design, I'd say you are probably headed towards the software industry or marketing or something like that. But that would be my take on it.
I think it's if you play sports, if you're a football player, you don't just learn to kick. You don't just learn to throw a ball or play a certain position. I think most designers I know, probably everyone here has been visual designer, interaction designer, and so I think being well-rounded even in this area just makes a lot of sense. So, and it makes sense to focus, when you're training in a class that's about a certain topic, and then switch to another focus, and it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think if you look at Kristian's mission statement, there were 4 areas: behavior, system, technology, and visual. And so I think what interaction design does is help you understand how those things come together and allow you to play a role in a really wide range of products and services that are being created in the world today, whether that's in an art context, a health context, consumer media, entertainment, etc. I think visual design has a role in many of those places, but I think you have a more integrated and more systems approach by being trained as an interaction designer and understanding how all those come together. And I think that kind of interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary approach is actually relatively new to academia. And so it's almost easier to gravitate, well, I'm a this, like I want to be in the box and I want to just know what I am, right? So those of us that have had careers as interaction designers, like to me it's like, duh, I'm an interaction designer. Like, yes, I have a photography background. Yes, I took typography and did letterpress. Yes, I wrote HTML code. I mean, I've done a little bit of it all, right? And now I don't make wireframes, as I confess. But which is that's one of the gaps of the field at the moment. But be that as it may, it's really about understanding that system of how all those things integrate together and how to help people interact with each other in the world around them.
We're getting to some juicy stuff here.
Like if you had a project team where you had so there's this hypothetical situation, you've got like a bunch of engineers, some marketing people, some visual design people, and they're building a product over time. One failure mode is that the product just gets more and more complicated. Because as each use case comes up, or as each ask comes in from a customer, look, I need to do this, the kind of unsophisticated response is to say, well, we're actually hearing that from a few people that have that feature. And I think when you have a senior interaction designer in the team, they're constantly looking for ways to kind of unify things so that you get that kind of elusive quality, simplicity, but at the same time something that's really expressive and powerful. So the key skill for me for an interaction designer is the ability to to pick the 3 different attributes of something that, when they're mixed together in all these different ways, can actually support 100 different features, but that's not 100 buttons on your UI. And so that's the kind of sensibility, that kind of systemic thinking, you know, where you can look at sort of something complicated and say, well, what simple thing can actually emerge to support this, all these different features? I think that's something that you don't necessarily get unless you've been studying systems for a long time and you're really looking for those sort of things.
I'm just gonna add something here that so I'm gonna turn for the panel for a second. That there's something really interesting about interaction design, and that it doesn't have a lot of physical medium to it. The physical mediums are in these other disciplines. So one question is, why don't I just become an industrial designer? You know, like, why study interaction? And the truth is that all of these other disciplines have been around for a lot longer, whether it's graphic or language and surface, and industrial design is stuff, or architecture with space, are actually all seeing interaction as part of their future as well. And I think it breaks down to a question is like, I have answers for this, by the way, but you know, are there things that are specific to interaction design that you wouldn't learn if you studied industrial design?
I have a formulation of that question, just to make it a little more concrete. In the Googleplex, it mentions that Larry Page has the design of everyday things on his bookshelf. It was originally called The Psychology of Everyday Things, and I think if I were to pick a book like that that's really seminal for me, it would be Micromotives and Macro Behavior by Thomas Schelling. I just wonder if any of you can name a source that was inspiring to you, because I think people are kind of curious, what's the content of interaction design? And if you could name a book that was inspiring to you, that might help people think about a place to get some kind of knowledge.
Can we go down, let's start at the left and go down?
All right, well, I read The Psychology of Everyday Things when it was The Psychology of Everyday Things. I'd say that was pretty seminal for me, and so by Don Norman. And then on the fiction side, I already said Hopscotch by Cortázar.
Yeah, I mean, I might cite some films. I mean, anything dreamlike, like, you know, Thomas Pynchon's novels, or Jean Cocteau's Orpheus, where it's everything that's in the Matrix comes from that movie. Movies that really question the nature of reality and show you how to communicate internal states, like how to take something that's internal and communicate it visually or temporally. I think that's a lot of what interaction designers do, is make something invisible visible. So if you look at especially some of the filmmakers that turned ideas like, you know, dying, going into the underworld, traveling into your dream, meeting yourself in another form or another life. I find that the best inspiration.
Wow, that's a. I think you should read a lot of different, and you should design a lot. But I think there's three books. Okay, sorry, we keep going up this week. I think the first one that really inspired me was Paul Rand's book, and I can't actually remember the name of it, but
anyone know the name?
Designer.
Form Design Colors?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah. So that, I'd say Inmates Are Running the Asylum. These are 3 very different books, but it's a set that I think that is worth reading. And Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think is the most distilled. You should give that to every product manager you work with, actually. Read it first.
And the one that I read at a young age actually was called Soul of a New Machine by Tracy Kidder, and it was about the development of the first 32-bit microcomputer. And it painted this portrait of this completely new way of working, which all these beardy, hippie coder guys would lock themselves in offices and do these epic feats of working all-nighters to create new technology. And to be honest with you, I think there's something to that, like, that makes me excited about my job, is just this like really hyper-focused with its tight team, and you're all making something that never existed before. And so, you know, I think the other book that's more recent, I would recommend that book, The Soul of the New Machine. It's really great. The more recent one, I think, is Bill Margaret's Designing Interactions, because he's the guy that came up with the phrase interaction design in the first place, and he's going to write a book about it. Rather than you just write this big missive about like me and what I think about the world, he just interviewed a bunch of people, which is really smart and sensitive of him, because he basically was saying, look, I'm going to use my access to people to get a whole bunch of opinions about what this is. And so similar to what Kristian was on here tonight, that basically you can flip through that and there's all these different people that are like really quite significant people who really sort of push the discipline ahead, just talking about their day or what they've done and their favorite projects and stuff. So I think to get a sense for the discipline, that's a good one to pick up.
Boy, I think I'm going to sound like Sarah Palin when I say all of them. You know, I'm not a great book reader, but I'd say one of the books that I read, not sort of on the discipline side, but was Game Over, about Nintendo and the rise of the game of that particular company. It dealt with business, but it also dealt with the actual user experience and what they were pushing for and how hard they tried and beat over, you know, Atari and so on. So that was an interesting book. And then science fiction, you know, Isaac Asimov. You know, some of those science fiction writers write incredibly descriptive accounts of product interactions that people have with things and with other people. You know, and so that comes to film as well. I mean, just look at some of that stuff, and it's really inspiring. I mean, everyone talks about, what is it, you know, the Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report, right? I mean, that's when the general populace became aware of a user interface. Right? People started talking about it, using the word user interface. But really, that stuff is great, and you know, be inspired by it, or come up with it yourself.
Yeah, can I echo that for a second? Because I was talking with a bunch of friends the other day, and we were all saying, we're so glad we read so much science fiction when we were little kids, because every single one of those things came true. And it completely inspired our work so that we were ready for the iPhone, for those type of things. So there's an amazing book called The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. That I recommend super. It's also a fantastic work of literature. It's not kind of hack science fiction, and that will give you so many fantastic ideas for what the future is probably going to be like.
Yeah, I like the science fiction recommendation. I also want to say, I think that interaction design is a new field, and you're on the avant-garde of figuring that out, and that you kind of get to figure it out and figure out how it affects other fields. And so you have the focus, and then you can go out and go pretty much in any direction that you want. So that would be the reason I'd say to do interaction design over another more focused field. You can complement it though, right? You can sprinkle in studying the other ones as well.
And we have a lot of latitude in our program to explore. Did you have any reference of inspiration?
No, I was really struggling with it because I actually feel like I did a lot of reading when I was in school or coming out of school, but I don't know how relevant that is to you now. I read a book recently called The Makers, and I can't remember the name of the author, but it's basically a vision for the Internet of Things. And so I thought that was a pretty good one. And Bruce Sterling actually just wrote a book about the Internet of Things, I think called The Shape of Things. So those are the two that I thought of, but nice. I don't really recommend anything from my past.
I think we need to kind of close it down, but I think one more question. I think I have to go to Justin, because he's always asking the questions, and it took him a long time to ask this one. So,
how do you infuse meaning in the experiences that you create?
Dig deep.
Yeah, there's something Bjork said. She's so poetic. It's amazing. And she said recently, she said, music is sound plus generosity. And I think that's the key. That's what will make you a great interactive designer, is to actually be thinking about the other person. You know, I always a little bit make fun of artists. You know, I have a lot of friends who are artists, but the highest praise an artist often has for him or herself is, I did it for myself. And I just think that is really not helpful if you're designing things for other people. So, well, you might by accident make something other people like. But to think about your audience, I think, and to think, I want to make a gift to people, to make their life, you know, more useful or less frustrating, or ideally to make it fantastic and wonderful, to something that would just make their eyes light up and want them to share it immediately with somebody else.
I think it's really important to know why your design works, or why you're doing it, versus just, I thought that was good. I think when you're designing a product, why does it have this shape or texture? You should have a reason, and I think that's the meaning, versus just doing it just because. Not that you can't sometimes do it, but in the end, you should have a reason. It might be an intuitive at first, but you should be able to communicate it at some point.
So I'm in constant tension as a freelancer or contractor. I left big, companies to sort of get away from being told what to do, so I could have more flexibility about what I do. And yet at the same time, I feel, almost like a prostitute at times, because I go and work for a company and I kind of have to do what they want. The good thing is that the project only lasts so long, but it's a tightrope.
That was a great question. I think it's a good one to end on. Is there anything else that anybody from the panel wants to impart on future interaction designers of tomorrow? Oh,
I had something else to say.
Say it.
Say it.
Yes.
Well, okay, this is actually pretty relevant because I'm surprised that nobody's used the word user experience designer or the term user experience designer. And it's, we've called ourselves various things over the years: user interface designer, interaction designer, user experience designer. It goes on. This is, I think, one of the tensions that we face in the business. It comes back to your question about, what is an interaction designer, or am I designing interactions in my everyday business of doing industrial design, architecture, and so on. I think there's a big debate right now about what a user experience designer is. How can I honestly possibly design the whole user experience? I don't think you can. That's just a thought.
Thank you.
One thing that I wanted to share with you guys is that I first had this experience when I was working at IDEO of being in a room with 2 or 3 other people who were very, very good at talking about a problem, and realizing that the problem that we were discussing was bigger than any one of us could keep in our head at that time. And that it was this really interesting symbiotic sort of experience of, I'm going to talk for a bit, and it's my job right now to kind of replay what we've been talking about, and I'm using a different part of my brain because I'm speaking, vocalizing. And then the other people are listening, and they're actually kind of reinterpreting what I'm saying, and then sort of morphing it a bit. And so you get this experience of a kind of a really intimate level of groupthink, which is something you couldn't think that way by yourself. But if you're really working well, there's this sort of really interesting, very profound kind of collaboration going on where the idea is too much for any one person to really grok at any one time. And that's really thrilling, and it's a really, really fun thing that you want to, if you like that, then interaction design is a good place to be.
I have one thing to add, which is I think it's really essential to try to be fearless. Like, nobody here is probably going to, has the risk of becoming homeless or, getting kicked out on the street. So, to the best of your ability, just try to do what would make your life most wonderful. Like, life is very, very short and precious, and it's really pointless to do something you don't enjoy in life, unless you really love money and cars and things like that, then make compromises. Yeah. But otherwise, just do exactly what you want. Be very generous with expressing it. Don't try to hold in your secret idea. Tell absolutely everybody about it, and eventually you'll either convince a bunch of people to help you to do it, through charisma, through raising money, something like that. Especially around this area, absolutely anything is possible if you're positive and have, a great idea and modest intelligence. You don't have to be generous. You just have to be enthusiastic.
So hard to follow Scott. Anybody else? Okay. Be fearless. So, first let's thank our amazing and thank you all for sitting here in the heat and stuff like this. I know I didn't get to everyone's questions, and I really appreciate your